This strange story was told to me by a friend of mine. 2 years ago she had to leave her job for some reason. It is not easy to find a new one nowadays, but she was lucky. Quite by chance, she was walking through the city and on a pole saw an ad. The content of the text she was very interested in, and Katya decided to call. They answered her very friendly, invited her to come and see the new place. Territorially it was located in a not quite ordinary neighborhood. It was on the outskirts of the old town, not far from the railroad. Further, 100 meters away, began the industrial zone, and behind it new buildings. It was a small mansion, still pre-revolutionary construction. They met the girl very friendly, the boss told about the conditions. And they were fabulous simply, the salary, however, a small, but the schedule 24 hours in 3, at the disposal of a beautiful room with a computer, telephone, TV, and a soft sofa. The work is not dusty, you just have to sit, be on duty, answer the phone and write something in the journal. The next day Katya arrived at her new place of work. She was met by the duty officer from the other shift, a young guy, and began to show her all the subtleties of the work. Catherine was happy. She could only dream of such a job. But close to midnight the girl began to overcome some excitement. Katya, as if she had a premonition of something. And her intuition didn't let her down. It began just after midnight. It seemed to the girl that on the second floor, where the closed storerooms, someone was walking. The sounds of footsteps were clearly heard in the silence of the room. Katya became scared, but immediately the thought arose that it was someone from the staff who hadn't left. She checked the key log, but all the boxes were filled in. There shouldn't be any people in the building. The girl didn't know what she should do. Out of grief and fright, she called her boss and explained the situation. They listened to her, laughed and said that it was rats running around the attic. They are like horses stomping, and they can be heard even in the daytime. Katya didn't hear them during the day. And it was hardly rats. The rumbling from above was capital. The girl could already clearly hear the furniture moving upstairs. It lasted for about 15 minutes, and then quieted down. But after another 10 minutes the worst began. Katya heard either singing or howling. The girl was desperate with fear. She herself was ready to howl in the same terrible voice. And the howling meanwhile sounded closer and closer to the window. Katya sat huddled in a corner behind the closet. Then Katya distinctly heard a sound as if something metallic was scraping on the glass from the street. She couldn't bear it any longer. She gathered her will into a fist and ran to the window with the intention of yelling at whoever was messing around. Katya lifted the blinds and was stunned. There it was outside the window. She couldn't even make out who it was. It was a 2-meter-tall translucent figure in a long black hoodie and a dead pale face. It was running its hand over the glass and trying to stick its hand through the window. Catherine could not endure the sight. From what she saw, she simply lost consciousness and collapsed on the floor near the window. It is difficult to find a job for an ex-convict. The only way is to become a loader or a driver. But I happened to be in the wrong place. I was offered a dirty job, or rather, not for the faint-hearted. The job was urgently needed, and then a vacancy came up, cleaning up the remains from the roads after a traffic accident. You can imagine the horror I had to face. I worked for about a month. I saw arms, legs, body parts, everything. I cursed all the drivers who were responsible for this nightmare, even the ones I picked up piece by piece in a bag. I could only sleep 2 hours a night. I couldn't sleep anymore. In front of my face there were mutilated bodies, blood, entrails. As I remember now, I came home after a terrible cleanup. A woman had been run over by a trucker. Her body was all dented up, her legs were caught under the braking track. In general, everything was bad. I turned on the light in my room and heard dishes clinking in the kitchen. I became alert, grabbed the first thing in my hand, an umbrella, and cautiously made my way into the hallway. Turning on the kitchen light, I saw. My legs gave out. I couldn't scream. I tried to, but I couldn't. All I could do was moan. On the floor of my kitchen lay the same woman. With one hand she was trying to crawl toward me, and I couldn't move from the horror. Her long intestine was dragging behind her. She was wheezing and moving her surviving arm. One of her eyes had just fallen out. There was blood all over the floor. A chill ran through me, all the hairs stood up on my body. Without letting go of the umbrella in my hand, I clutched at the doorway with both hands. It happened in about 5 seconds, but it felt like an hour. Pulling myself together, I rushed to the front door and frantically started to open the front lock, but I couldn't get it open. In a panic, I decided to calm down somehow and hit myself in the face with my fist, telling myself that it was all a hallucination. When I couldn't take it anymore, I turned around and there was another dead man in front of me. He was standing about 3 meters away from me. Leg bones and ribs were sticking out of him, his jaw was missing, torn bloody clothes hung in rags. For the first time in my conscious life, I roared aloud. Then more wheezing came from the room and I realized they were all here. I don't remember exactly how I ran out of the apartment, but I was told later that the lock was completely ripped off. Now I'm in a neuropsychiatric hospital. I'm not able to be in the dark and I'm afraid to be alone. And I can't take it anymore. Sometimes they come back, and I see them all. Hello everyone, my name is Dimitri. I recently graduated from a technical institute, and for good studies I was immediately taken to one large enterprise, an engineer. There was a lot of work, repair, design, assembly of various equipment. I worked almost without weekends, but I earned a decent income. Let's not go into my life and profession, let's move on to the story that completely changed my life and priorities. It happened last week on Sunday. I spent the whole day lying on the couch, eating and sticking to the laptop, as at 1 a.m. I got a call. My boss called urgently to work, because of problems with technology. Reluctantly I got up and started to get ready, and in 30 minutes I was on the spot. To my surprise there was not a soul in the enterprise. Having passed in the department, I started to work. As it turned out one of the conveyor motors broke down, and I had to fix it. I will not describe the process of fixing. The first 30 minutes everything was quiet. To be honest, I am afraid of silence since childhood, even more darkness, because it makes me feel uncomfortable, and here in the whole department heard only the process of my painstaking work. After working for about an hour I heard something resembling footsteps or knocks. I did not understand, because they were not clearly audible. That's when I got goosebumps on my skin and on my forehead came drops of sweat. I still have trembling fingers from writing this. I sat for about 5 minutes without even breathing and listened to the sounds, and now I knew for sure that they were coming from above, where there was a neighboring department. I laughed a little at my childish behavior and started to work further. I had a little time left and I was already in my warm bed in my mind, but how wrong I was. I think everyone has had that feeling when someone is watching you closely, and then I was 100% sure that someone was looking at me in the far dark corner. But the real terror I felt was when I heard the door creak. I knew it was iron, and a draft couldn't do that. Then I started to quickly gather my tools and get ready to go home, making as little noise as possible. I quickly gathered my tools and started digging in my pockets looking for my keys. At that moment the lamp went out for a short time and I heard quick but heavy footsteps behind me. At that moment I started breathing faster. The light came on and there was no one in the room. I took the gas key and the lantern in my hands. They say that at such moments all life passes before the eyes, but I did not feel it. I was wildly terrified and my head could not even generate a train of thought, not that I could not go into memories. As I headed for the door, I saw a silhouette in the far corner. It was small and sort of human. As I approached the door, the light went off and my keys fell out. Turning on the flashlight on my phone I heard quick footsteps on the stairs to the door where I was, and then I didn't rush to open the door. I just froze with animal terror, and this one that stood behind me just stood there looking at me as if playing on my nerves. I started to get up slowly and felt someone's heavy breathing and cold touch, and not thinking long, I hit something with a gas key, and it squealed. Soon I regretted it, because the light bulbs in the room burst and everywhere heard footsteps and blows. Pointing a flashlight at the sources of sound, I saw about 10 strange creatures. Now I will try to describe them. The skin was a dark shade, most likely gray, eyes were abnormally large, and a huge mouth full of teeth, from which I could not take my eyes off, and height were smaller than a normal person, about 130 centimeters. They started to climb the stairs and then I started to panic and look for the right key, when I felt 2 hands of these creatures pulling me down the stairs, but I was lucky that I was of athletic build and it was not difficult to push them away. But suddenly I felt a sharp pain in my arm. One of the creatures was digging into my arm and I was hit on the back of my head with something heavy. The last thing I remember is the sharp and intense pain and the darkening of my eyes.